And we're saying we will not allow any American companies to bid on our contracts anymore. That's worth about $1 billion over 10 years. So we're hurting each other. So I think just stop this nonsense.
A sign of the times, perhaps, with Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, breaking with tradition and travelling to Europe, not the United States, on his first official foreign trip.
Canada just hit the U.S. back with its own tariffs after the U.S. didn't hesitate to spark up a tariff war between the two countries. With President Donald Trump's heavy tariffs on Canadian goods, the new Canadian Prime Minister is ready to start a war, and other Canadian officials are kicking U.S. goods off the shelves. How will Trump respond to these retaliations, and what impact do these latest revelations have on global trade? Let's find out. Tit-for-tat tariffs with Canada and U.S.
It's going to be an absolute disaster for both countries. We're your largest trading partner. I don't want to respond, but we will respond like they've never seen before. You need our uranium, you need our potash, you need our high-grade nickel. I will stockpile our high-grade nickel at 50% of your military and manufacturing needs. Your aluminum, the steel, the lumber. It will be an absolute disaster. And this is all due to
Even before Trump became president, he had announced his plans to impose heavy tariffs on neighboring countries. Once his administration started, he put his plan into place, starting with tariffs of 25% on Canadian goods and 10% on energy exports from Canada. According to Trump, this is because of national security in the U.S. Trump claims that Canada isn't doing enough to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigration into the U.S. through its border. Canada strongly disagrees with this because they actually executed new plans to strengthen the security of the border. But Trump didn't hesitate to execute these tariffs. Canada didn't sit back, but immediately hit the U.S. where it hurts the most, imposing tariffs on $30 billion in goods imported from the U.S. from March 4th and from April 2nd. This will increase to tariffs on $155 billion in goods. This tit-for-tat tariff war continued as Trump then imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum products. Immediately, Canada responded with 25% retaliatory tariffs on steel products worth $12.6 billion, aluminum products worth $3 billion, and other imported U.S. goods worth $3 billion.
If he wants to destroy our economy and our families, I will shut down the electricity going down to the U.S. And I'm telling you, we will do it.
The tariff war recently reached high tensions when the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, threatened to impose a 25% surcharge on electricity exports from Canada to the U.S. Ford even threatened to cut off electricity completely, which would put 1.5 million Americans in the dark. Upon hearing this, Trump threatened to double the tariffs on aluminum and steel from Canada to 50%. Feeling threatened, Ford paused his plan, allowing Trump to go back on his word a few hours later. Now, the Canadian government is seeing a change with the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, and his first step as Prime Minister was to hit the U.S. where it hurts the most. Canada new PM visits Europe instead of U.S.
Our leaner cabinet will focus on two priorities in particular. First, protecting Canadian workers and their families in the face of unjustified foreign trade actions. And second, growing this great country by putting more money in Canadians' pockets, by ensuring that government spends less so Canada can invest more.
In Mark Carney's victory speech as the Prime Minister, most of his words were spoken against Trump as he vowed to win the trade war with the U.S. He attacked Trump for imposing tariffs on Canada and trying to make Canada the 51st U.S. state. But Carney announced that he would win the trade war against the U.S. He called the tariffs unjustified and accused Trump of trying to collapse the country's economy. He also claimed that Trump was attacking Canadian workers, families, and businesses, but said he won't let Trump succeed. Even more, Carney has announced that Canada would continue imposing tariffs on U.S. imports until the Americans show them some respect.
And Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, used his first official overseas trip to meet with the leaders of Britain and France, seeking support from old allies as relations with the U.S. sour. Amid President Trump's tariffs and hints at annexation, it's unclear what Europe can offer Carney right now other than solace.
As a new Prime Minister, Carney's first decision was to meet other global leaders. In normal fashion, Canadian leaders visited the U.S. first, as the two countries are each other's largest trading partners, with $2.5 billion worth of goods and services crossing the border daily. But Carney left Canada's closest neighbor and went to Europe instead, visiting the leaders of the UK and France. This was a statement towards the US that Canada can find other trading partners. European leaders also expressed their support for Canada, as they have also been affected by Trump's tariffs. Many are watching to find out how Trump would respond to the new Prime Minister's behavior, especially since Carney has been talking tough concerning the trade war. What's more, Trump had previously called the former Prime Minister Governor Trudeau, but it doesn't seem like Carney would take that kind of insult. Trump tariff jeopardized Canada's trade with U.S.
Well, it's a liberation from affordable living because, hey, a tariff on steel and aluminum means your housing cost is going to be higher. It's going to cost more to build housing in America. Energy tariff make gas more expensive. And guess what? A tariff on produce, grains makes food more expensive. So higher costs for housing, gas, groceries.
Toronto's mayor recently slammed Donald Trump's tariffs, calling them nonsense. She warned that Trump's tariffs are driving up the cost of essentials and that it's not only hurting Canada but also hurting the U.S. Mayor Olivia Chow revealed that if Trump doesn't stop with his trade war, Toronto will execute a procurement ban on American goods and other retaliatory measures. She had previously ended license subsidies for new Tesla owners, a dig at Elon Musk, who is an important part of Trump's administration. Chow has announced that Toronto has a 10-point plan to counter the tariffs and win against Donald Trump, from limiting U.S. travel to banning American companies from bidding on municipal contracts. Although it might be difficult to break Toronto's reliance on American suppliers, this will be another blow against Americans as they suffer from Trump's tariff policies. Americans will pay for Trump's tariffs.
$400 billion worth of goods from Canada each year. If we place a 25% tax on most of those goods and a 10% tax on energy-related goods, that will raise tax revenue for the federal government. Now, it'll raise less than just taking 25% times 400 because people will change their behavior. People will import less. And so when you account for all of these shifts in behavior and how tax revenues change, we estimate that tariffs proposed go into effect on Canada would raise federal tax revenue by about $36 billion in 2025. And if you divide that across all households in the United States, that adds up to about $270 in additional taxes paid because of the tariffs on Canada.
Canadian officials have repeatedly warned Trump that it's the Americans that will pay for Trump's tariffs, as there's no true winner in a trade war. Americans are already highly worried about the tariffs, despite the fact that Trump repeatedly assured them that this would boost the local economy. A recent poll revealed that 90% of Democrats and 57% of Republicans are worried about tariffs and it leading to a recession.
More than 60% of the crude oil imported into the U.S. in December 2024 came from Canada. Canada also exports a large amount of electricity to the U.S. That means the cost of gasoline and electricity may rise for some Americans. The auto industry will also be heavily impacted by the tariffs on both Canada and Mexico. The average vehicle could increase by nearly $6,000 in the U.S. based on one estimate from investment bank Benchmark Co. That amount could change as tariff negotiations continue. The U.S. government will collect revenue from the tariffs, but that revenue comes with some downsides.
When Americans were asked what they are most concerned about among inflation, healthcare, immigration, and tariffs, 72% of Americans said that they are concerned about tariffs. Trump's tariffs are expected to harm all the countries involved, including the U.S. economy. Already, the new tariffs might add $9,000 to the cost of building a house and $12,500 to the cost of cars. Canada asks for tariff exemptions.
What we're working at is making sure that we're first in line for exemptions. And we told the administration very clearly how we feel these tariffs are going to hurt the American people.
President Trump has announced his shocking plan to slap tariffs on the entire world, some high and some low, and then pick and choose who will get relief. To navigate this, Canada has said it would try to get tariff exemptions from Trump's plan. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has said that Canada will try to get exemption after attending a closed-door meeting with the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Ford confirmed the plan that Trump would put a global tariff on the world, but Canada is trying to be the first in line for exemptions. Ford revealed that he explained just how important Canada is to the U.S. economy during this meeting, especially since many goods go back and forth the border multiple times. If Trump refuses to give these exemptions, there's no telling how the trade war between the two countries will change. Trump calls Canada a state.
They should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down, I said, what would happen if we didn't do it? He said Canada would dissolve. Canada wouldn't be able to function if we didn't take that 20% of our car market. You know, they send us hundreds of thousands of cars. They make a lot of money with that. They send us a lot of other things that we don't need. We don't need their cars, and we don't need the other products. We don't need their milk. We got a lot of milk. We got a lot of everything. And we don't need any of it.
It's no surprise that Canada has been instant and decisive in retaliating against the U.S., especially with Trump's behavior towards the country. The U.S. and Canada have been strong partners for decades, but Trump triggered a lot of tensions between the countries when he called Canada a state and revealed plans to annex the state. Trump made calls for Canada to become the 51st state of the U.S. and even called the former Prime Minister a governor. He also added that the U.S. does not need anything from Canada, and he has been apologetic in his quest to conquer the Canadians. In response, Canadians have been upset about Trump's attitude and disrespect towards them. According to former Prime Minister Trudeau, Trump is using these tariffs to break down Canada's economy so that it would be easier to annex the country as the 51st state. Trudeau had constantly said that Canada will never become a part of the U.S. The new Canadian Prime Minister Carney holds the same stance, as well as the millions of Canadians. Canadians show us products a cold shoulder.
The shopping baskets, the boycott is being followed by an entire distribution chain.
Here we have a display just for Quebec, and we're putting more emphasis on that. Then we have products with the Canadian logo. Our warehouse shifted gears very quickly, looking for regional products from Canada and also from other countries outside the United States.
Canada is hitting the U.S. where it hurts the most right now by refusing to buy its products. Canadians are refusing to use U.S.-made products and even booed the American anthem at a hockey game. Meanwhile, Canadian businesses are refusing to do business with their American counterparts. Recently, Canadian businesses have been turning down American products, starting with alcohol. Economists expect that this would affect different levels of the agriculture supply chain. Canadians have reported that many American products are no longer on the shelves of their grocery store, and Canadian businesses have been adding a Made in Canada label on their product. American businesses are also feeling the pinch, with some of them receiving emails from their Canadian customers who will no longer purchase their products. Some American businesses are complaining that Trump's tariffs are harming them. Large grocery store chains in Canada are now putting forward local products rather than American products. If it continues this way, it's expected that the agricultural sector in the U.S. and other businesses will suffer. Canadians avoid traveling to the U.S.
It's an uncommon sight at the Canadian-U.S. border. No lineups. But that's the new reality across the country as more Canadians shun travel to the United States.
We're boycotting them for sure.
This week we were planning on going, but we decided to make a different decision.
New data shows Canadian travel to the U.S. by land dropped by a whopping 23% last month. One factor, the low Canadian dollar. But a new poll shows the top reason for not crossing the border, cited by almost half of Canadians surveyed, the political climate under U.S. President Trump.
Even worse, Canadians are boycotting travel to the United States due to Trump's trade policies. Canadians who already had plans to travel to the U.S. are now canceling them and considering other alternatives like Mexico. In fact, some Canadians have said that they won't even step into the U.S. if it's a connection or a layover. The escalating trade war is expected to worsen the tourism sector in the U.S., with many Canadians revealing that they won't go into the U.S. in the next 4 years. A recent survey by Ledger revealed that 36% of Canadians with U.S. travel plans have canceled it, and 2/3 of Canadians have reduced their purchase of American products. Due to the boycotts, even travel boards have changed their advertising campaigns. 3/4 of residents aged 55 and older have said they are avoiding trips to the United States. Canadian Airlines have also announced that the desire of Canadians to travel to the United States has decreased by 25%. Due to all of these, American tourism companies are offering more discounts and offers to Canadians to attract them across the border. What's more, Canadian investors have announced that they will not invest any funds in the U.S. until Trump stops levying tariffs on Canadian goods. How Canada can hit Trump where it hurts.
10 ships arriving and 10 ships leaving. We did about 160 million tons of cargo last year. 75% of that is those bulk commodities, grain, coal, potash, sulfur, and other agricultural products outbound.
Peter Exoda is the port CEO. He says shippers who normally plan 6 or 9 months out are now taking things a few weeks at a time because Trump is so unpredictable. And he says Trump's threats and his tone leave Canada no choice but to find new markets, new partners.
Canada has been pushed into a corner by the U.S. and realized that it has no choice other than to retaliate. Now Canada is looking for new ways to fight against Trump's tariffs. Canada has already implemented different measures against the U.S., like targeted tariffs on particular U.S. goods and dollar-for-dollar tariffs. Canada has also threatened to cut off energy and electricity supply to the U.S., which would have a major impact on both countries. Canada has a lot of potential to affect America's economy, since the two are each other's largest trading partners. For instance, about 30 states receive some of their electricity from Canada, especially 3 states which are Vermont, New York, and Maine. If Canada should cut off electricity to the U.S. as a retaliation for the tariffs, it could keep 1.5 million Americans in darkness or pay more for their electricity bills. The only downside is that Canada will also hurt itself, as it will lose money without these exports. But some Canadian politicians are saying that Canada should stop retaliating and instead look for other alternatives. Canada can partner with other countries aside from the U.S., diversify its exports, and reduce reliance on the U.S. Trump is so sure that Canada will have no choice but to beg the U.S., but Canada can do the opposite. It seems this is Carney's plan, as he has ignored the U.S. and traveled to Europe instead. Trade war to sap Canadian and U.S. growth.
A trade fragmentation could result in lower growth and higher inflation. By discouraging business investment and increasing costs for production inputs and for consumption. In our simulations, the reduction in growth and rise in inflation will be particularly large in Canada, Mexico, and the United States.
The ongoing tariff war between Canada and the U.S. is expected to affect both Canadian and American economic growth. According to an OECD forecast, the tariff hikes will drag down growth in Canada and the U.S. and also drive up inflation. The forecast says that U.S. households will pay a high direct price and that the U.S. will probably lose more money than the tariffs are supposed to generate due to the economic slowdown. The OECD also added that the tariffs will worsen global business investments and boost inflation, causing central banks to keep their interest rates higher. Canada has refused to back down from Trump's tariffs and is doing all it can to retaliate, whether hitting U.S. goods or the tourism sector. But Trump has stated that the more Canada retaliates, the more the U.S. will impose more tariffs. How do you think this will end? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.